That was a late night. We're all up having coffee this morning, getting going on what day is this? A Wednesday? Holy smokes, went late last night. But Pitt got the win. Took care of business against Florida State. 88-73 at the Peterson Event Center last night, the penultimate game of the regular season. Blake Hinson set a record. Jalen Lowe got a double-double. The officials, in their infinite wisdom, decided to call 34 fouls, leading to 49 free throws at a game that started at 9:05 p.m. And in the end of it all, Pitt ended up with 20 wins for the second year in a row. First time in a decade, the Panthers have gone back-to-back with 20-win seasons. It was a good night at the Peterson Event Center. It got a little interesting in the second half, but Pitt showed a lot of resilience and pulled out the victory. I think there's a lot to talk about from that game. We're all alive. We're all awake. And let's talk about Pitt's win over Florida State last night at the Peterson Event Center here on the Wednesday edition of the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, I think we're all going to be moving a little bit slow today. We've got Pitt football practice in the south side, so that starts right around 9. So as you can imagine, it's a pretty quick turnaround when we didn't leave the Peterson Event Center until about 1 a.m. last night. Getting a quick turnaround heading down to the south side this morning to watch a little bit of spring football. We'll have lots of reports, of course, from the south side right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com with video highlights from practice and post-practice interviews and press conferences, in addition to all our coverage at the website right there, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, where we've all of our Pitt coverage, football, basketball, recruiting, everything you need is right there at Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com to stay up to date on all of your Pitt sports content. And then, of course, message boards to talk to other Pitt fans. And that's where really a lot of the action happens. Even, a lot of our reporting and info we post on the message boards, and obviously that's where Pitt fans talk to each other, is on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. It's the best online community of Pitt fans that you're going to find, and they're all hanging out talking about Pitt sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Panther-Lair.com and our YouTube channel right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. It's a place to find all of our Pitt video content. These daily morning Pitt videos that we do every day of the week, Monday through Friday, our weekly live show, that's tonight. Typically it's Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. I think we're pushing it back till 8:30 tonight due to another basketball game I have to attend. We'll talk. We can talk about that during the show, but we're going to start at 8:30 tonight. Me and Jim Hammond will get together to talk to you about some Pitt sports, football, basketball, recruiting, everything going on in Pitt sports. That'll be live tonight right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We'll have live basketball post-game shows after the games next week, the ACC tournament games. And then wherever Pitt ends up beyond that, and if they keep playing like they did last night, they should find themselves in the NCAA tournament, in which case we will do live shows after the NCAA tournament games. Let's all hope so. We're looking forward to that. The live shows are always fun. The post-game shows are always a lot of fun. Anybody who's been a part of them during the football season or so far in the basketball season knows that we usually have a pretty good time hanging out and talking a little Pitt sports and talking about the game. And the best part, as I always say, you've got that chat screen right there to the right. You put your comments and questions during the live show, and we have kind of a back and forth. You comment a question on these morning Pitt videos, there's not a lot I can do. Sometimes I might reply to your comment on YouTube, but for the most part, there's not a lot we can do in terms of interaction. But during the live shows, we can have a lot of interaction. And so, tonight, Jim and I will be talking, but you can be part of that conversation. And certainly during the post-game shows, that'll be the case as well. So hopefully you join for some of our live streams. And if you want to make sure you don't miss any of them, you don't forget about it, subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You can turn on notifications and get an alert sent right to your phone. Anytime we go live or anytime we post new content, anything like that, you'll know about it. So click that button. It's right down there. All right, Pitt 88, Florida State 73. It was a game that Pitt led by 18 with about, what was that time when it was plus 18? About 17 minutes ago in the game. Federico had back-to-back buckets. One was a putback. One, he finished a fast break. I forget who got him the assist on that. And that put Pitt ahead 53-35. And they had been toying with a double-digit lead for a while. I think they first got to 10 points with 3.5 minutes left to go in the first half. It was 32-22. They ended up finishing halftime up 11, or going to halftime up 11. They scored quick right out of the break and went up 16. And then, like I say, they pushed it to 18 after a pair of Federico baskets, and Leonard Hamilton called a timeout to try to get the troops back together and try to salvage something. And salvage something they did. Florida State played well. They made, I think, 6 out of their next 8 shots, while Pitt only made 2 of 6. Pitt committed 2 turnovers and 3 fouls in that stretch. They didn't get an offensive rebound on any of their misses. And Florida State was able to cut the lead down. They cut it down, I want to say, as low as 7 at one point. Yeah, it was 56-49 at one point. Florida State was on a real roll. Pitt had pushed the lead back to 14, but then Florida State went on a run. And they kept it in single digits, kept toying with the game being in single digits all the way through under 11 minutes when Jameer Watkins made an and one to make it 62-54. And there was an 8-point game. But then the magic happened. And it was the magic that Pitt relies on so often. It's the magic Pitt relies on to win games, whether they're behind or they're holding to a lead or just when they're trying to take over a game. And that magic, of course, was Blake Hinson. Blake Hinson drains a deep 3. I mean, a deep 3. I don't know if he was on the logo because I don't know if he was dead center, but it was a logo distance. It was a long 3. It's funny, the photo just popped up there of Hinson sort of posing after a 3. That was from a previous game, but he's basically standing on the logo. He drains a 3 to put Pitt ahead 11. Next possession comes back down, drains another 3 to put Pitt ahead by 14, and the Panthers never looked back. Florida State was able to get it to 11 a couple of times, get it to 12 a couple of times, but it never got into single digits again, and Pitt was able to stay ahead for the remaining, 10 minutes of the game, 9 minutes of the game, whatever was left. It was a huge performance by Hinson, who finished with 27 points, but those 2 threes in particular, 2 of the biggest shots of the game, maybe the biggest shots of the game, because Florida State kept knocking. They kept pushing Pitt. I think 3 times after the 16-minute mark, they got the score into single digits after trailing by 18. 3 times, and Pitt would pull back ahead, and Florida State would get right back in it and get the lead under 10. But then Blake Hinson makes those 2 threes, and that was ultimately the separating point. That was the turning point where Pitt finally pulled away. Like I say, it didn't get to single digits again. And not lost in those 2 baskets is that Blake Hinson set a record with those 2 baskets. His first basket, the 3 that turned it from an 8-point game into an 11-point game, tied Ashton Gibbs' record for 3-pointers made in a single season with 102. His next one, put it up 1. Broke the record, set a new record for 3-pointers made in a single season with 103. He made 1 more 3 before the game was over. Forgot when he made it. Thought he made another one. Maybe he anyway, he finished with 6 threes. So he now has 104 3-pointers on the season, setting a new Pitt record, and he's still got games left to play. This is game number 30. Ashton Gibbs set that record with 102 in like 34 games. Blake Hinson now has 104 in 30 games. He's got at least 2 more games left to play, and I'm pretty sure he's going to play more than 2. So that record is going to keep getting broken. He is going to keep setting a new record. And it's not like we've never spent time talking about Blake Hinson, but I think I wrote this in the 321 column last week, made like a passing reference, or maybe it was in somewhere else that I wrote it. But like Blake Hinson really is going to be a guy you tell your kids about and your grandkids. If you were the type to sort of reminisce about the greatest players you've ever seen, about the greatest accomplishments you've ever seen, about the sports figures who just were so sort of eye-opening and at times even amazing in what they're able to do. I mean, Blake Hinson is in that category. And if you are the type down the road to tell your grandkids or your kids or whoever about, well, this one time I saw this, I mean, Blake Hinson's going to be one of those guys. I think Pitt fans who went to Pitt in the 2000s, we'll talk about LaShawn McCoy or later Aaron Donald, or certainly in the basketball court, talk about guys like Chevy Troutman, Brandon Knight and Julius Payton. I mean, there are a lot of legends of Pitt sports from this century, really. But Blake Hinson is achieving rarefied air, and not just because of setting records or anything like that, but because this guy really is one of the most ridiculous players we've ever seen in a Pitt uniform, this century at least. And I only cut it off at this century because my frame of reference doesn't go back into the early 1990s. I started at Pitt in the late 1990s. And so I really, my formative years of watching Pitt basketball were spent, Ben Howland, Jamie Dixon, Brandon Knight and Carl Krauser and Levance Field, Sam Young and DeJuan Blair. And DeJuan Blair is one of those guys who is just, he's one of one, Blake Hinson is one of one. There's no other Blake Hinson. The great Bill Graham quote about the Grateful Dead, that they're not the best at what they do. They're the only ones who do what they do. Blake Hinson's not the best at what he does. He's the only one who does what he does. He truly is one of one. Who else have you ever watched in a Pitt uniform who is like a comparison for this guy? And it's not just, a big, a 6'7" guy who can shoot threes. It's the whole package with Blake Hinson. It's what he represents on the court. It's what he's able to do, obviously, with scoring. But how he's able to play, he's added a certain bully ball element to his game this year. I felt really bad for the one Florida State player who attempted and failed to take a charge against Hinson. I would just get out of the way. I mean, he's got to be pushing 250 pounds, if not more. And that's not like a weight crack. He's a big guy. And if that dude came barreling down the court at me, I would get out of the way. I would not attempt to take a charge. I'll take a charge against Jalen Lowe. I might even take a charge against one of the centers, Probably not Ishmael Leggett because he goes hard. And probably not Zach Austin. He might just jump over me. I'm definitely not taking a charge against Blake Hinson. Shout out to that Florida State guy for even attempting it. But he's just such a unique player, and he's such a unique personality, and he's such a unique energy. And Saturday is going to be his final home game in a Pitt uniform, final game at the Peterson Event Center, and it's been a pretty incredible 2 seasons for Blake Hinson. And it's not a coincidence that Blake Hinson's 2 seasons overlap with Pitt's first back-to-back 20-win seasons in a decade. I don't think that's a coincidence at all. Obviously, he was the team's leading scorer last year and this year. It's obviously it's not a coincidence. He's one of the causes. Even though I would say the primary cause for last year's success and this year's success has been the guards, I should say. We'll talk about them in a second. But Blake Hinson has become the face of Pitt basketball's resurgence under Jeff Capel. The head coach is always going to be sort of the face of it. And this resurgence of last season and this season has a lot of faces. Nelly Cummings is a face of that. Jamarius Burton, the 2 freshmen, the 2 guards this year of Jalen Lowe and Bub Carrington. But Blake Hinson is that one guy who has been a face of the program for the last 2 years as they've gotten good again. And look, they're at 20 wins now. They're 20-10. The season ends right now. It was a good season. It'll be disappointing if they lose out. If they lose NC State on Saturday, they lose in the first game of the ACC tournament, and they miss the NCAA tournament. That'll be disappointing, no question about it. But if you win 20 games, you had a good season. It could be disappointing, but it's still a good season. Both of those things can exist. And so this back-to-back good seasons. I think last year was undeniably a good season, and I think this year is very much on the course of a good season. It's already arrived, I would say, with 20 wins. And Blake Hinson is the face of that. This you will tell your kids if you were at the Louisville game when he scored 41. You will tell your kids if you were at this game tonight when he made huge threes to break a record and keep Pitt ahead to win this game. Just an unbelievable performance, an unbelievable player, and truly one of one. We won't see another guy like him. From the shooting to the body type, to the physicality, to the personality. We won't see another guy like him in a long time. And we can, memorialize his career more when it actually comes to an end. But on the occasion of this game last night, where he was so important to the win, and he's going to be important to more wins down the stretch here. But on the occasion of last night's game where he was so important to the win and set a Pitt record in the process, another Pitt record, because he just keeps doing it. I think every now and then you can have a little Blake Hinson appreciation post, right? And that's not to say that we shouldn't also appreciate the guards, because now, 30 games into the season, I mean, it's pretty incredible what Jalen Lowe and Bub Carrington have been doing as well. The thought that I kept having last night, the thing that kept popping into my head, was the Florida game. The Florida game was really, everything up until that, it was cream cheese. I mean, these guys were awesome. Bub Carrington especially. They've been so good. These guards are incredible and all this stuff. And then they got into the Florida game. And you remember how that went. They played a power conference opponent for the first time. That power conference opponent got physical with them and really kind of pushed them around. And I think those guys would tell you they didn't respond well to it in the course of that game. And it was eye-opening. It was eye-opening for certainly those of us on the outside saying, okay, probably should slow our roll with these freshman guards for a second. And I think it was probably eye-opening to those freshman guards as well. That, okay, this is how it's actually played. This is the challenge I'm actually going to have to face. And the real process of their season started there. And I think Jeff Capel would probably say the same thing. He said things along these lines last night, but I think the process really started there. They were good up until that point, but they weren't battle-tested. And to really reach their potential to be able to play at a truly high level in the ACC, they needed to go through those battles. And quite frankly, they needed to get knocked around. They needed to get beat up. They needed to see what the physicality is really like when you're playing at the highest level of college basketball. Well, they figured it out. They got it. Jalen Lowe last night gets his first career double-double with 17 points and 10 assists. This was after he had 12 and 9 at Boston College, so he was this far away from getting double-double at Boston College. He got it taken care of last night. And then Bub Carrington, 12 points, 6 rebounds, and 4 assists. Another really good game for him. He had 4 turnovers. We'll talk about the turnovers in a second. Because the thing that really stands out is, he had 4 turnovers. Jalen Lowe had 2 turnovers. That was 6 out of Pitt's 11 turnovers. And turnovers were really the biggest problem. And I think, the turnovers were being caused by Florida State's length. They were getting into the passing lanes and just reaching out and grabbing balls that I don't think Pitt expected. I don't think Pitt's players felt like they were putting the ball in jeopardy. But I think they underestimated Florida State's length and height. However, Florida State very much tried to use a full court defense, tried to defend in the backcourt, tried to press after made baskets and on, baseline out of bounds plays. And by my count, despite the fact that Florida State made 22 baskets, they made 22 baskets, a bunch of free throws, and had a handful of baseline out of bounds plays, I only counted 1 turnover generated by Florida State's pressure defense. Now, Leonard Hamilton was quick to say after the game that they haven't been a very good defensive team this year, but it's still pressure. And pressure can force teams into mistakes. Certainly teams with young guards you would think would be susceptible. But Pitt got through it with only 1 turnover against the press. And there have been a handful of games this year where teams have tried to do that. They've tried to press after made baskets, teams that just sort of typically do it. And this team, Pitt, has not struggled with that at all. And that's a huge testament. I mean, everybody gets involved. Federico's involved in breaking the press. Ishmael Leggett, obviously. But it's really about Lowe and Carrington. And those guys have been more than up to the challenge every time. Every time. There's that old saying in college basketball and college sports, but I mean college basketball especially, once you're 20 games into the season, freshmen aren't freshmen anymore. They've played enough that now they're basically sophomores. They've got that experience level. I would say that certainly applies 30 games into the season. And it applies not just to say, well, you guys need to be better, but also to say they're playing like they're not freshmen. I mean, Jalen Lowe and Bub Carrington have been really, really good. And you look at this, where this season really took off with that game at Duke. And Blake Hinson made 7 threes in that game. But when you look at what Carrington and Lowe have done since that Duke game, I mean, you can see how this whole thing is coming together. You really can. You can see how this team has come together, obviously, to get to 20 wins, to put themselves in a position to be on the bubble, and to really, I think, position themselves as one of the more dangerous teams in the ACC and maybe one of the more dangerous teams in the country. I think when they are good, they can play with just about anybody. And I also think that even when they're not good, they can find their way back into being good. I mean, they were down last night 12-7. 6 minutes into the game, they had 7 points, and they were down 12-7. And then they went on a run, and they built it back up, and they got all the way up to 18, like I said, and then Florida State cut into it, and they started struggling again, and they weren't making their shots, but they found a way. They got the offense going. They made some shots. Blake Hinson obviously led them, but Jalen Lowe was huge in that stretch. Bub Carrington. It was the whole group. And when they're going like that, when they've got the whole group going, they're dangerous. They are really, really dangerous. They're pretty fun to watch too. And now they're 20-10, and it's a record in the ACC, 11-8 in the ACC with 1 game left to play. NC State at home on Saturday. They're taking care of business. They're doing what they need to do, and they're positioning themselves for the NCAA tournament. And you look at that game last night. You can't tell me there are 25 teams that are better than Pitt right now, playing better than Pitt right now in the country. And you certainly can't tell me that there are 68 teams playing better than Pitt right now in the country, or 34, or whatever the at-large bids are. You can't convince me of that. Now, maybe it's not just about who's playing the best right now, but they are. I think they are. All right, we got to get down to the South Side. We got to get you coverage from Pitt football. So we'll have all of that right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And, of course, Panther-Lair.com. We'll have all of the Pitt sports coverage that you can possibly handle. We'll have we'll talk some football tomorrow on the Morning Pitt. We'll have the mailbag edition of the Morning Pitt on Friday. We have our live stream tonight. That'll be at 8:30. We got a lot of stuff going on. So make sure you like this video and subscribe, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Head over and check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Go get another cup of coffee, and we will, and enjoy your day here today on Wednesday. We'll talk to you tonight for the live stream, and we'll catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pitt right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.